The world's tale unfolds just as the Demon King begins a full-scale invasion, throwing everything into chaos. Nations fall one by one, including the once mighty Gargan Empire, known for its vast armies of humanoid warriors. As elves, dwarfs, and humans are pushed to the brink, they unify in a desperate attempt to hold back extinction. A final counteroffensive is launched. An elite suicide squad infiltrates the Demon King's castle for a last-ditch assassination attempt. After an intense, bloody battle, the Demon King is finally brought down. As the surviving members prepare to escape, they stumble upon something terrifying: a mysterious girl bound in chains, guarded by two monstrous demons. One of the heroes, Theron, recognizes her and chooses to stay behind, urging his comrades, Kyle and Ursa, to escape without him. As they flee through the castle halls, they enter a chamber housing a strange crimson crystal. Kyle approaches, but magical projectiles rain down from above. Though he blocks most with his sword, one hits him directly, leaving him vulnerable. In that moment, Ursa steps between Kyle and danger, using the last of her magic to shield him, sacrificing herself. As she fades into nothingness, their attacker finally steps forward, revealing his true, winged form before Kyle's eyes. Burning with fury and sorrow, Kyle charges headlong toward the enemy, driven by a desperate need for revenge. Though he lands a strike, it barely phases the winged demon, who responds by hurling enhanced, razor-sharp feathers at him with no mercy, giving Kyle no time to react. His sword spirit speaks up, revealing that the attack is a forbidden technique known as elimination, a powerful and unblockable spell that wipes out anything in its path. Realizing he won't survive the next onslaught, Kyle chooses to go all in. He unlocks the full potential of the gemstone embedded in his sword. The spirit doesn't stop him; if anything, it stands by Kyle's decision, ready to risk everything to defend its master. Kyle calls upon his most powerful technique, channels every last ounce of energy into the blade, and drives it into the demon with full force. The strike hits its mark, ending the demon's existence, and with it, the sword's life as well. The battlefield falls quiet. Kyle is the only one left standing. Peace has returned, but it came at a steep cost. His village, his companions, everyone he cared about, they're all gone. With no reason left to keep fighting, Kyle drops to his knees, prepared to surrender to despair. But before he can close his eyes, the crimson crystal nearby begins to glow violently. Realizing it might be dangerous, he drags himself up one last time and heads toward it, hoping to stop whatever disaster it might cause. But as soon as his fingers make contact with the crystal, everything vanishes into darkness. When he opens his eyes again, he's stunned to find himself lying in bed, his own bed, in his own room. Nothing makes sense. Desperate for answers, he hurries to the window, only to see his city standing untouched. The city that should have been reduced to ash is perfectly fine. Tears fall down Kyle's face as he starts to believe this must be a cruel hallucination. Then, the door creaks open. His childhood friend, Lisa, walks in casually, telling him to stop lazing around and come downstairs already. Kyle freezes. Lisa's alive. She has no idea why he's staring like that. Thinking he might be sick, she walks up to him to check, only for Kyle to wrap her in a tight embrace. He's just grateful to see her breathing again. She blushes, flustered, assuming he's either acting weird or still half asleep. When she tries to pull away, he hugs her even tighter. This awkward moment ends up with both of them falling back onto the bed. Kyle is left red-faced, while Lisa regains her composure, smacks him hard in the gut, and yells that she needs time to make sense of whatever that was. She tells him she has to mentally prepare herself for whatever he's planning and storms out after calling him a baka. Winded and holding his stomach, Kyle suddenly pauses. He can feel pain, real pain, which means this isn't a dream. That's when he notices something under the blanket. Lifting it up, he finds the crimson crystal glowing faintly beside him. It hits him; the crystal must have sent him back, before the invasion ever began. Looking into the mirror, he sees a much younger version of himself staring back. He glances down at his body and realizes there's not a single scratch on him, which convinces him that this isn't some kind of illusion. Looking out the window, he notices the land has returned to its normal state. And more importantly, Lisa, the woman he loved most, is alive. With that, he begins to believe he's somehow been transported back in time. Still, he's not sure if the magic stone alone could actually have that kind of power. While pondering all this, his stomach growls, reminding him he hasn't eaten. He hurries off in search of food and is pleasantly surprised to find the dining table full. Lisa had cooked a complete meal. The sight instantly brings back memories of when Lisa would often help him and his mother with meals. Not wasting any time, he digs in and devours every single dish. It doesn't take long for him to clean the entire table. Just then, his brother Theron walks in, ready for breakfast, only to find the table completely empty. The idea that Kyle finished everything stuns Theron, but he shrugs it off since it's Kyle's birthday, even if Kyle doesn't consider that a proper gift. Seeing Theron, Kyle is reminded of the fight they were caught in just before he died. Theron leaves the room to take care of his own hunger, while Kyle, now almost certain he's really back in the past, goes to get answers. He seeks out his mother, who, like in the life he remembers, spends most of her time in the underground library. She'd been up reading all night, unaware of the time. Without addressing that, Kyle jumps right into asking her a question. Since she's an archmage, he hopes she'll have the answer he needs. He asks whether a spell to travel through time actually exists, and she confirms that it does. But before he can get too hopeful, she explains how rare and complicated it is. It demands an extraordinary amount of magical energy, far more than even the strongest mags can muster. Kyle then asks if a magical item could possibly hold such vast energy, and his mother acknowledges the possibility. However, she adds that such an item would need to store power accumulated over centuries, or be charged by the loss of countless lives. In this case, the demonic attacks had caused enough death to flood the stone with power, and that might have been what sent Kyle back. Kyle's mother brings him a book containing the image of the only magical object known to store such energy. Unsurprisingly, it matches the very stone Kyle now possesses. It turned out to be the fabled divine dragon's heart, an artifact thought to have vanished over a millennium ago. The revelation clears up all the doubts Kyle had, and he feels genuinely grateful for the chance to reconnect with his mother, especially after having lost her in his previous life. She, on the other hand, is proud of the maturity he now shows, unaware that the boy in front of her carries memories and wisdom from someone 10 years older. After they finish their heartfelt exchange, she gets up, intending to prepare a meal. But when Kyle gently points out there's no food left, she simply offers the divine dragon's heart to him as a birthday present, just like Theron had done before. Later, Kyle finds a quiet spot and takes another look at the artifact. He reflects on what his past self would have hoped for him to change. That's when Diesel appears, and he quickly apologizes for what happened that morning. He awkwardly explains that a strange dream had made him act oddly. He dreamt she had been isekai'd, which somehow made him hold on to her. Oddly enough, this makes Diesel feel touched, and she accepts the apology. She even wishes him a happy birthday. As he stares into her eyes, painful memories come flooding back, specifically, the moment of her tragic end. Their town had been the nearest human settlement to demon territory, and when the demons launched their first assault, her town was the initial target. He remembers the moment she drew her last breath. It had haunted him ever since. He swore vengeance that day. Lost in thought, he's soon brought back to the present as Diesel gently pulls him back to reality. The two sit together, watching the sunset. But Kyle is fully aware, 3 years from now, chaos will return when the demons launch their assault. He silently vows to prevent it this time, even if it means rewriting everyone's future. He won't allow history to repeat itself. That night, Kyle stays up writing down everything he can remember about the future. He considers warning people about the impending threat, but deep down, he knows no one would take him seriously. So, with no other choice, he commits to facing the Demon King himself, even if right now, he's just a shadow of who he used to be. Weak or not, he draws his sword, determined to see if he still has what it takes. Kyle trains diligently with his sword, visualizing the winged demon that ended his life in the past timeline. Though he manages to avoid several of the imagined creature's strikes, he's still taking hits. It becomes clear that he's not yet strong enough to shoulder the responsibility of saving the world. Fortunately, he still has 3 years until the Great Invasion arrives. With that in mind, Kyle decides to take his swordsmanship and magic training much more seriously this time, something he admits he failed to do before. Casting spells such as strength and haste, Kyle enhances his physical capabilities and immediately notices a significant power boost. He suspects that the Crimson Crystal may have something to do with this increase in magical output. Regardless of the cause, he continues his rigorous training. With his newly enhanced speed, he now manages to dodge most of the winged demon simulated attacks. However, just as he's about to land a blow, he's struck and thrown down again. He soon realizes that while his strength has grown, his body isn't yet adjusted to the amplified power granted by magic. Still, there's no room to slow down, he has to be ready when the apocalypse begins. Meanwhile, hiding nearby in the bushes, Theron and Lisa secretly watch Kyle, puzzled by his sudden dedication. Curious, they try to figure out what caused this unexpected change in his behavior. At that moment, Miss Layla, Theron's mother, shows up to check on her son. She casually asks Lisa if Theron's been acting responsibly. Lisa wastes no time tattling, exposing how Theron mooches off her daily instead of looking after himself. Layla decides that conversation can wait. Her attention is on Kyle, whose movements and intensity in training suggest that something profound has happened. Layla questions both Lisa and Theron about any major event that may have influenced Kyle. Lisa recalls how empty his eyes looked just the day before. Though neither of them knows the full story, Layla suspects the transformation could be due to a crush. She claims it's the kind of thing that changes a teenager overnight. Shocked and instantly ruling herself out, Lisa storms over to Kyle, demanding he confess who he's fallen for, or else she'll beat it out of him. Kyle, completely confused by her outburst, can't give an answer. True to her word, Lisa begins pummeling him. Feeling guilty afterward, she prepares a nice lunch to make up for it. Layla and Theron also join in the meal. During lunch, Kyle explains that Layla is actually his mentor. Taking advantage of her presence, he asks the group if they know of anyone with enough sway to influence multiple nations across the world. Theron figures kings fit that description. Lisa suggests high-ranking clergy might hold such influence. Layla, on the other hand, mentions Randolph, the legendary hero who defeated the Demon King 3 centuries ago, as someone who could command such widespread authority. Kyle explains his interest. He wants to rise to that kind of power. He knows the odds are low, but he's determined to try regardless. In the next 2 or 3 years, the only realistic path for him is to become a hero. Of course, that's only if he puts in serious effort. With tension running through him, he suddenly rises to his feet, leaving the others puzzled, wondering if he might have hit his head or something. That night, Kyle surrounds himself with piles of books from his mother's personal collection, trying to soak up every bit of knowledge he can find that might help him reach his goal. Theron drops by his room after hearing about Kyle's ambition and offers him the most cliché advice about gaining strength. But Kyle has a different perspective. He says strength alone won't cut it. Being a hero takes money too, because traveling and venturing around isn't cheap. On top of that, he explains, a hero needs influential allies, people with power who can help navigate the political side of things. And perhaps the most vital ingredient? Luck. Theron takes it all in, but he still can't figure out why Kyle wants to walk this path. He's not being nosy, he just senses that Kyle has another reason behind his actions, one he hasn't shared. Kyle is genuinely impressed by how sharp Theron is but can't open up about his true motivations yet. So instead, he simply asks his friend to have faith in him. Theron, supportive as ever, wishes him luck and quietly exits the room. With the room to himself again, Kyle cracks open a new book and stumbles across a few useful pieces of information, something that could potentially help him earn money. He also thinks about meeting a certain woman, someone he believes will play a vital role in his journey toward heroism. By the next morning, he's made up his mind, he'll set out in 2 days. During breakfast, he informs Layla and Theron of his plans. Layla is caught off guard by Kyle's resolve and asks if he's already told his mother. He has, and she was so emotional, she couldn't stop crying. Layla, ever the sarcastic one, decides to send her good-for-nothing son along with Kyle, thinking it might do him some good. Kyle is relieved, he had planned to bring Theron anyway. In a teasing tone, Layla remarks that Theron would make an excellent human shield, and Kyle adds that he'd make a fine disposable pawn. All jokes aside, after their meal, Kyle heads off to inform Lizzie about his departure. The news hits her hard, so much so that she can't even bring herself to meet his eyes. When she hears he plans to travel to the royal capital to gain experience, she immediately asks to join him. But Kyle refuses, worried for her safety. Still, Lizzie stands firm, insisting she won't be a burden. She's trained with the Oracle Warriors, after all. Realizing there's no changing her mind with words alone, Kyle leans in and kisses her, assuring her that he'll come back to her first, and they'll pick up right where they left off. Lizzie is speechless at first. Once she collects herself, she makes him promise not to take any reckless risks, and to return to her unharmed. Beneath the shade of the trees, they share a long, heartfelt embrace. Knowing his journey won't be easy, Kyle begins to make preparations. He heads to the market for supplies and invites Lizzie to tag along. As they walk, He tells her he's sorry for worrying her, but she reassures him, saying it wasn't really stress. Then, her attention is drawn to a beautiful woman nearby. A graceful elf catches everyone's attention. Her presence is captivating. When she turns slightly, her beauty leaves an impression, especially on Kyle, who immediately recognizes her. It's Urza. He walks toward her, carefully thinking about how to reintroduce himself. A memory from his past life resurfaces. Urza once shared her true name with him in confidence. Believing this might help him reconnect, he uses it. He calls her Excess. The moment the name leaves his mouth, he knows he's made a terrible mistake. Only 3 people alive are supposed to know that name, her and her parents. His use of it immediately marks him as a threat in her eyes. He tries to defuse the situation, but he knows her temperament too well. A public outburst is coming, so he acts quickly. He softly utters her true name again, using it to lull her to sleep. As she falls unconscious in his arms, Kyle lets out a relieved sigh, disaster averted. But behind him, Liz's expression darkens with jealousy. She accuses him of being unfaithful. Kyle tries to explain. He says he met Urza before she appeared in this world. That explanation only makes things more confusing. After all, Urza is right there. Lizzie refuses to believe him. She claims if he travels alone, he'll gather every woman in the capital. She declares that she's coming with him. He brushes that off for now. Urza is the real problem. When Urza wakes, Kyle tries to reason with her. But it's hard to believe someone who claims they'll fall in love 5 years in the future, and that she'll willingly share her most guarded secret. From her perspective, a stranger knowing her true name is dangerous, and she's prepared to kill him to protect herself. Kyle can't die. Not when he's still searching for a way to prevent the world's downfall. Thinking fast, he offers to form a contract with her, one that binds him from misusing her name, at least until he explains how he learned it. Urza is stunned he even knows about magical contracts. She tests him. Does he understand the consequence of breaking such a bond? He nods. Death. That satisfies her for now. But there's a catch. They can't form the contract until the full moon, and that's still weeks away. She asks him to stay with her until then. But Kyle has to leave the next day. After weighing his options, they reach a compromise. The next morning, Kyle's parents see him off. Lizzie insists on coming, and now he's traveling with Lizzie, Theron, and Urza, who insists on staying close until the contract is finalized. Soon after departure, Kyle deviates from the main path to the royal capital. Lizzie questions the sudden change in route. He tells them he wants to head to Sungard first. He reminds them of the tales about the legendary Magic Queen's labyrinth in that region. Pulling out a map, he declares their new destination. The others laugh at the idea. They scoff at the rumor of hidden treasure, and Theron jabs at Kyle, saying someone so obsessed with wealth is bound to get scammed. They argue that the map he bought is probably a scam, but when Urza inspects it closely, she notes the parchment's age. It might actually be authentic. Since it's a charming girl making the claim, everyone is suddenly willing to believe her. Still, Lisa points out that the marked treasure spot is extremely distant, and the maze it's in runs incredibly deep. Kyle reassures them that he has a plan and they don't need to worry. His strategy? Dig through the ground so they can bypass direct combat. Once they reach the site, they begin digging. Theron questions why they can't just walk in, and Kyle explains that magical traps lie ahead. Triggering them would mean engaging in lengthy battles. Theron asks if that detail was on the map, but Kyle says no. It's from past experience. He's dealt with it all before and has no desire to repeat the ordeal. He adds that he never imagined his first task as a self-proclaimed hero would involve digging like a miner. Meanwhile, Urza keeps Lisa busy. She directs the team like a seasoned leader, and they follow her instructions without hesitation. After an exhausting day, they sit down to enjoy a meal prepared by Lisa. As soon as they taste it, everyone is amazed by how delicious it is. Urza even says she feels revitalized. She notices a boar hanging nearby and curiously asks Lisa how she caught it. Lisa casually mentions that she caught it barehanded, leaving Urza stunned. Later, Urza creates a small bath for herself and Lisa to relax. The simple act excites Lisa, and they share a quiet moment. Lisa opens up about her envy toward magic users since she can't use magic herself. Urza praises her physical strength, especially her ability to take down a boar, and asks if she trained so hard because of Kyle. Lisa confirms this and reassures her that Kyle could never harm her, even if he knew her true self. She confesses that she suspects Kyle is hiding something, but she believes he'll reveal it when the time comes. Their conversation becomes light-hearted, like sisters bonding, before they all return to digging. Urza joins Kyle and takes the opportunity to question him directly. She tells him that while the others may trust him due to familiarity, she doesn't know him well enough to feel the same. She points out that the ring he wears likely ties into his hidden agenda, and Kyle confirms it. The ring boosts his physical abilities. To shift the focus, he keeps working and finally uncovers the treasure, asking Urza to fetch the others. Once they enter, they are stunned to find piles of gold coins. Theron dives into the treasure joyfully, while the rest remain frozen in awe. Kyle reminds them that the gold is merely a tool to help achieve his greater goal, not something to waste recklessly. While they're distracted, he quietly slips away to retrieve his sword. As he approaches it, a radiant glow envelops the blade. A spirit emerges from within, surprised to see a human again. The sword spirit enters full-on guide mode, launching into a lengthy monologue meant to applaud Theron for making it this far. However, Theron quickly silences her by placing a hand over her mouth, insisting she quiet down. He doesn't want his companions overhearing. Before she can take offense, he calmly explains that he already knows who she really is, a flawless replica of the ancient magic queen Sildonia, and that the sword beside her was originally forged by the queen herself. Curious, Sildonia asks how he knows this, and Theron promises to explain everything later. He casually mentions that he and his party bypassed all the elaborate traps and puzzles by simply digging a shortcut through the dungeon. Sildonia seems annoyed, feeling that her sacred resting place has been disrespected. But Theron doesn't dwell on that, he's ready to claim the sword. He knows a final challenge will be triggered once he draws it and asks Sildonia to take care of it in his place. Intrigued by his odd behavior and boldness, Sildonia agrees and merges back into the blade just as Theron pulls it free. Moments later, she emerges after scanning his memory, and asks if he's really traveled back in time. Theron confirms it, revealing he still has the divine dragon heart, the magical relic that allowed him to manipulate time in the first place. Though Sildonia knows such magic exists, she still finds it hard to accept. Before the conversation can go any further, Theron's friends show up looking for him. Thinking fast, he whispers to Sildonia to play along. He loudly announces that he's just stumbled upon an ancient talking sword and pretends it's their first meeting. He introduces her to the group, maintaining the act. Lysa, ever the warm one, offers Sildonia some cookies and eagerly asks if she's truly the legendary queen. Sildonia explains that she isn't the queen herself, but a magical entity created by the original Sildonia to judge those who reach this place and determine if they are worthy of her legacy. Kyle, skeptical, questions why a magical being would even eat cookies. Sildonia calmly explains she converts them into magical energy, so it's not just for taste. Lysa, full of curiosity, asks why Sildonia looks like a child. Sildonia clarifies that she chose to freeze her appearance after her magical abilities hit their peak. She then reveals a hidden detail: the dungeon was designed to collapse as a final test if she judged the challengers unworthy. She didn't trigger it, of course, Theron had already convinced her otherwise. In the end, she formally acknowledges him as worthy, giving him permission to wield the legendary sword. Sildonia instructs Theron to grab the apport bag placed beside him, a magical container linked directly to their treasure vault, functioning as a spatial inventory. Meanwhile, Kyle makes a request to Sildonia, expressing his wish to wield her sword instead of Theron. She instantly denies the request, explaining that their compatibility doesn't match. Lysa and Urza, seeing Kyle get turned down once more, tease him for his growing list of rejections. Soon after, the entire group, including Sildonia, heads back to the royal capital. With an endless amount of wealth now at his disposal, Theron sets his sights on acquiring top-tier equipment. Upon arrival, he nonchalantly tosses a hefty sum of cash at the shopkeeper to show off just how wealthy he really is, then proceeds to purchase the shop's premier item. He also urges the others to choose whatever gear they prefer. Once they finish selecting their items, everyone ends up with gear suited to their roles. Theron now dons bright, striking blue armor. Lysa opts for combat gauntlets, fitting for her close combat fighting style. Urza picks out a spirit stone amulet, while Kyle, choosing stylish armor, ends up looking even cooler than Theron. Trying to show off his new look, Kyle flirts with one of the store assistants, only to creep her out with his awkward lines. Elsewhere in the shop, Theron eyes a selection of powerful elemental stones, particularly those effective against reptilian enemies. The shopkeeper presents a rare blizzard stone capable of casting ice-based spells, and without hesitation, Theron purchases every last one, despite the steep prices. He also buys out the entire stock of healing potions and casually hands over 10 million jails for everything. The overwhelmed shopkeeper and staff, now suddenly wealthy, gratefully thank Theron and invite him to return someday. As the group walks back, Kyle expresses concern that their flashy spending might lead people to suspect them of criminal activity, maybe even a bank heist. But Theron seems unfazed and casually reveals his plan to leave the city by tomorrow morning. Hearing this, the others decide to take the opportunity to explore the capital before it's too late. Later that evening, Kyle finds a moment alone with Sildonia and brings her to the hotel room to have a private conversation. He asks whether it's truly possible for him to change what's to come. After all, he's already altered events by meeting Urza and Sildonia earlier than originally destined. Sildonia explains that altering the past doesn't necessarily shift the same future. Instead, Theron's arrival triggered the birth of a new timeline, a different reality, parallel to the original. But within this version, Theron's choices still hold the power to shape outcomes and potentially prevent the looming catastrophe known as the Great Invasion. Confused, Theron wonders about the Divine Heart crystal that accompanied him. If the crystal is just a duplicate, shouldn't he have arrived as a copy too? Sildonia proposes that the reason may lie in the use of a fusion spell, possibly merging his essence with something beyond their understanding. Sildonia explains that a fusion spell works by combining two souls into one, greatly boosting magical strength. The crystal's arrival in this world was to merge the current Theron soul with his past self soul, thereby amplifying his magic power. Theron thinks back and realizes this tracks. His power and strength really have doubled recently. Sildonia speculates that with this level of enhancement, he could eventually cast the most advanced spells ever recorded. Still, she warns him that mastering these abilities should be his top priority. With her guidance delivered, Theron thanks Sildonia and returns to studying, diving into books and magical texts. Meanwhile, Urza and Lisa continue to share a room during their travels, becoming more familiar with each other. That night, Lisa remarks how the journey hasn't been as difficult as she imagined. She's grown used to outdoor living and doesn't struggle with camping anymore. She notices Urza is still awake and asks why she hasn't gone to sleep yet. Urza admits she's enjoying the moonlight and wants to stay up a little longer. Lisa heads off to bed while Urza quietly reflects on the journey so far. A month ago, she had serious doubts about this adventure, but to her surprise, it's been enjoyable. Lisa, being cheerful and sweet, has become a close companion. Sildonia is brilliant and always brings something new to the table, which makes her company rewarding. Then there's Theron, someone who's simply entertaining to observe. Kyle, though, remains a mystery to her. Something about him feels hidden, like he's guarding a part of himself. His intense gaze feels like it can pierce through thoughts, but strangely enough, Urza doesn't mind it. It doesn't unsettle her at all, if anything, she's okay with it. Just as she's thinking about him, Lisa mumbles in her sleep, declaring she's the only one allowed near Kyle, as though she sensed Urza's inner thoughts. The odd declaration catches Urza off guard, but she soon shifts her attention back to the moon, quietly praying to the goddesses to keep their journey safe. Suddenly, she remembers something important. Tonight's full moon is the only night she can complete the contract ritual with Kyle. If she misses it, she'll have to wait a whole month for the next opportunity. Without wasting time, she jumps up and begins searching for him. Kyle, meanwhile, has just finished sword training and lies on the ground, catching his breath. He's content with his progress and how well the blade responds to his movements. Sildonia approaches and comments on his swordsmanship. She notes that the techniques he uses weren't part of their old world's teachings. Kyle praises the weapon, saying it feels like an extension of his own body. Sildonia agrees Zal is a legendary blade, one of the finest ever forged. Kyle even admits he's wielded mithril swords before, but none of them compare to this one. Urza shows up abruptly, shouting at Kyle. He's confused as to why she's seeking him out so late at night, especially under the full moon. She reminds him of the important event they planned, a binding contract ceremony, and is clearly annoyed that he forgot. Kyle tries to brush it off, suggesting they postpone it to the next full moon. But Urza is adamant. Her real name is on the line, and she refuses to take any risks. She insists they perform the ritual now, not later. She steps into the center, preparing the ceremonial line, and explains that this type of contract is akin to a marriage vow. Both participants must reveal their true names and vow not to misuse them. The bond also requires the two to remain in close proximity, very much like a committed union. As she completes drawing the contract line, Kyle begins nodding off. Urza shakes him awake and demands his presence. As he walks over, he reflects on how they did a similar ritual in his previous life. He believes this marks the beginning of them being together again. Urza makes him promise never to exploit her name for wrongdoing. He agrees, then leans in to kiss her. She jerks back, demanding to know what he's doing. In his past life, they had been romantically involved by the time they did this, so a kiss had followed the vow. Kyle mistakenly thought the kiss was a required part of the ritual, but Urza sternly corrects him. That only applies when it's a true marriage ceremony. Her frustration flares, literally, igniting flames behind her as she unleashes fire in his direction. Kyle screams as the fire scorches him. The next morning, the group sets off on a trip to Arkin Town. Along the way, Urza, Kyle, and Theron are all visibly sleepy. Lisa notices and asks why none of them got any rest. Kyle tries to deflect by calling it a minor mishap. He also cuts Urza off before she can reveal he was burned. Lisa grows more suspicious when she smells smoke on him, but Kyle stays tight-lipped. Theron, on the other hand, didn't sleep because he was busy flirting all night, so Lisa shrugs it off. She shifts focus and asks why they're heading to Arkin. Kyle lies and says that Sildoniya had a vision of the future, which led them there. Sildoniya's strange reaction to the lie doesn't go unnoticed by Lisa, who calls them out. But again, the group avoids giving her any real answers. When they arrive in Arkin, a large crowd has gathered. Theron explains that Princess Melena, Arkin's beloved and graceful royal, is making a public appearance. She's known as the jewel of the city, beautiful and compassionate, almost fairy tale-like. None of the group members have seen her before, and they're eager to catch a glimpse. When she finally appears, her elegance and kindness live up to the rumors. She even takes the time to help a child who stumbled. Kyle then notices one of her bodyguards and recognizes him. Sildoniya quietly asks Kyle if Princess Melena is the one he's targeting. He confirms with a yes. Later on, Kyle meets with Sildoniya to share an update on what's to come. In just 2 days, deep within the forest that lies between Arkin and Sains, Melena is destined to die. He remembers it clearly from his previous life. Melena lost her life when she turned 16, which is now. She was ambushed by hydras. Sains had recently suffered an attack by these same creatures, and Melena had traveled there to offer her sympathies. Tragically, she never made it through the forest. Her death was seen as a sorrowful result of her kind and noble heart. But Kyle doesn't see it that way. To him, it's a foolish decision. Why would anyone knowingly head toward a city that's under threat? Sildoniya, however, believes there's more beneath the surface, that there could be political motives behind Melena's death. Kyle admits that she might be onto something. There's one person who stands to gain everything from Melena's demise, her stepbrother, Karina's. Coincidentally, he is currently in the same city. Although he rarely makes public appearances due to his social awkwardness, his presence there feels too calculated. Still, despite the suspicions, the public viewed Melena's death as nothing more than a tragic accident and moved on. This time, Kyle intends to change the outcome. If he can prevent Melena's death in 2 days, it will mark the beginning of his legend, a moment that will echo through the kingdom as the day he saved its beloved daughter. Every hero needs a story to be known by, and this is his first chance to claim it. Theron walks in, informing Kyle that he has been asking around in town to learn about Princess Melena's activities, but came up empty-handed. Curious, Kyle questions why Theron would be looking into this at all, suspecting he might have overheard their earlier conversation. Theron admits that he's developed feelings for Melena and plans to protect her from any danger so he can one day be seen as her savior. For that reason, he wants to know her schedule to find out if she's taking any risks. Kyle is taken aback, realizing they both had the same idea but for entirely different motives. Regardless, he tells Theron that the princess truly is in danger. Theron jokingly asks if Kyle has suddenly become a fortune teller, but Kyle clarifies that it's actually Sildoniya who possesses the gift of foresight. According to one of her visions, a hydra will attack the princess in 2 days during her trip to a nearby village. Grateful for the warning, Theron declares he will stick by the princess every moment from now on to ensure she's safe, essentially shadowing her constantly. 2 days later, Princess Melena departs in her carriage towards Sain's village, guarded by 2 town soldiers. Kyle's group observes from the cover of bushes, and Lisa questions how Kyle can be so sure of the impending danger. Before he can respond, Sildonia cuts in, admitting that she had foreseen the threat herself. It's clear she's weary of fabricating stories, but since it's the only way for Kyle to explain his knowledge of future events, she goes along with it. Urza then asks how they can tail the princess's caravan without being noticed by her guards. Sildonia answers that she has another ability for that purpose. To the group's surprise, she transforms into a hawk right before their eyes. Shocked, they listen as she explains that her true form is actually the gemstone embedded in Kyle's sword, and she can shift into any living creature using her mana. Taking flight, she locates the carriage and streams the view directly through the gemstone, allowing the group to watch events unfold in real time. Theron feels envious, remarking that Kyle could now spy on anyone from the comfort of home, perhaps even women in private moments. Lisa and Urza are disgusted by his mindset and prepare to hit him, suspecting he has already tried watching them in the bath. Theron confesses he did attempt it once but was stopped by Kyle, which makes Lisa sigh in relief, noting that thanks to Kyle, Urza's secret is safe. Unfortunately, Kyle blurts out that he already knows about the heart-shaped birthmark on Urza's backside, prompting everyone to wonder if Kyle might actually be worse than Theron. Though it's all a misunderstanding, somehow. Sildonia thankfully cuts in to report unusual activity. The caravan drivers have halted the horses and are now turning their weapons on the guards. Kyle quickly realizes that the chaos must be Kaina's, Melena's half-brother, pulling the strings. Without wasting time, he rushes to the scene, where the hired drivers have already eliminated the guards and scattered some sinister materials across the ground, likely the same lure that, in the past, drew a hydra to attack the princess. Kyle makes short work of both drivers, swiftly knocking them out and binding them, intending to extract the truth about who ordered the attack. While this is happening, Theron enters the caravan and discovers Princess Melena lying unconscious. Though alarmed, he's relieved to see she's unharmed. Just then, a pack of hellhounds charges toward the caravan. Urza, Liesa, and Kyle step up to confront the beasts, while Theron stays inside to shield Melena. The sheer number of hellhounds starts to overwhelm them, and Kyle calls out to Theron to get the caravan moving. Unfortunately, Theron discovers the reins have been cut by the attackers, and repairing them will take time. Before they can catch a breath, the ground trembles, an enormous hydra emerges from the forest. Among the group, Kyle knows he's the only one capable of facing such a monster, so he breaks away toward the forest, instructing the others to guard Melena. Liesa pummels the life out of the hellhound swarming her, while Urza summons a salamander to burn through the rest. Meanwhile, as Kyle races toward the hydra, Sildonia's voice checks in, asking if he's certain he knows how to kill one. Kyle answers that he's slain a three-headed hydra before in another life, though he admits this could be more difficult. Upon arrival, he's stunned to find this beast sporting not 3, but 8 massive heads. He hesitates for a moment, trying to decide on a course of action. Sildonia wonders aloud if they should retreat, but Kyle insists there's no turning back. He'll face it head-on. His mission is to save the world, no matter the odds. The one advantage here is that hydras have direct, predictable attack patterns, making them easier to evade. But the real danger lies in their toxic breath. True to form, the monster exhales a cloud of deadly poison, tainting the air and earth around them. The hydra assumes victory when Kyle pauses mid-fight, but it doesn't realize his leather coat is enchanted to resist such toxins. When the fumes dissipate, Kyle reappears, hurling a blizzard stone at the beast, instantly encasing parts of its body in ice. He follows up with an explosive stone, managing to sever one of its heads. Sildonia, surprised, praises his skill, impressed he can hold his ground so well. But the fight is far from over. Within seconds, the hydra's severed head regenerates, reminding Kyle of its terrifying ability to heal almost instantly. Fueled by fresh rage and determination, the hydra unleashes an even deadlier wave of poison toward Kyle. Without hesitation, he charges straight through it, shielded by his coat, and hurls another stone at the beast. He repeats this process again and again. Yet every time he manages to sever one of its heads, a new one sprouts in its place. In one bold leap, Kyle slices off 3 heads at once, but each swiftly regenerates and reattaches to the body. Meanwhile, Urza is still locked in her own battle against a cluster of monsters, though her worry for Kyle is growing. She voices her fear to Lisa, convinced that no one can defeat a hydra alone. Lisa agrees but points out that they can't afford to be distracted, their own opponents remain undefeated. For now, they have to focus on surviving. Despite their combined efforts, the trio is being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. At the same time, Kyle realizes his arsenal is down to a single blizzard, and the hydra still shows no sign of falling. If he wants to win, he has to strike at its heart. Clutching his final blizzard, he makes a break for it. He charges at the monster's core, drives his blade deep into it, and plants the blizzard inside the wound. The hydra thrashes violently and flings him across the field, slamming him into a tree. It struggles to retaliate, but the damage is done. It detonates from within, scattering its remains over the battlefield. Sildonia, impressed, remarks that placing the blizzard inside an exposed wound guaranteed its defeat. Kyle responds that he has been preparing for this kind of life and intends to see his mission through. Glancing around at the gore-strewn ground, he admits the sight is unsettling. Soon after, Urza and the others finish their own fight and go searching for him. They're stunned when he emerges from the forest alone, having slain the hydra himself. As he draws nearer, the stench of hydra blood makes them recoil, and they insist he keep his distance until he cleans up. Kyle heads to a nearby river to wash away the foul smell. Sildonia, sensing his disappointment, tells him she knows he wanted more recognition than he received. When he returns, he finds Theron inspecting the carriage. Inside, Theron discovers a strange drug used to summon monsters. Taking the packet, Kyle realizes Sildonia's suspicion was correct. The attack on Melena wasn't random. It was a calculated assassination attempt under the guise of a monster raid. Urza tells him Melena and her attendants are still unconscious, almost as though they've been drugged. Kyle suggests using an antidote to counter the effects, and Urza gets to work. They wait, hoping Melena will regain consciousness. Elsewhere, a more sinister scene is unfolding. Prince Kerenus waits impatiently for word of Melena's death, drumming his fingers and silently counting the moments. At his side stands Zentos, the princess's guard. When it's time for an update, Zentos orders a search party into the forest. Back at the carriage, night has fallen and Melena is still unresponsive until Kyle steps inside, worried, and she suddenly awakens. Confused but relieved, she asks if she's still alive and admits she was sure she would die. She wonders if they were the ones who rescued her, and before Kyle can answer, Theron jumps in to claim the credit. Kyle promptly smacks him to shut him up, then kneels in front of the princess. He explains that he stumbled upon her being attacked while traveling and intervened to protect her. Her maid, Arca, wakes soon after and immediately tries to drive the strangers away, but Melena quickly reassures her. Melena tries to step outside to witness the aftermath, but Kyle attempts to dissuade her. When she refuses to stay put, he reluctantly allows her to go. Outside, she's met with the sight of her fallen guards, and grief washes over her. Lisa softly remarks that Melena's demeanor is nothing like the bright and lively woman they met the previous day. At that moment, Sildonia approaches Kyle to report that Arkan's guards are on their way. Kyle quickly urges Melena to steady herself. He assures her that she's out of danger now, but Melena's expression hardens. She insists they must leave at once, before the guards arrive. Kyle argues that these soldiers belong to her own kingdom and should be there to safeguard her. But she explains that the man seeking her life is none other than Zentos, commander of the 2nd Battalion. If these soldiers catch them here, she warns, they won't just execute her, they'll kill Kyle and his group as well. The revelation shocks Kyle. He remembers seeing Zentos earlier, never suspecting the man capable of such treachery. Before departing, Melena orders Arca to burn all the corpses to delay pursuit. She instructs her other maid, Ninos, to take the driver's seat while Arca stays at her side. She offers Kyle and his companions a place in the carriage, promising to explain everything once they're on the move. Just before the door closes, Theron tosses the pouch containing the monster-summoning substance into the flames, hoping to draw more creatures and slow the approaching guards. The group departs swiftly, but the road is silent. The weight of what they've just experienced hangs in the air. As the journey begins, Melena recounts the chain of events. She firmly accuses Zentos of orchestrating the assault, though skepticism lingers among the listeners. She then claims her own brother, Caenas, is aiding Zentos. Kyle, full of doubt, repeatedly questions her certainty, but she insists she's telling the truth. She recounts overhearing their scheme firsthand. The day prior, Zentos offered her a drink, which she accepted without suspicion. Soon after, dizziness overcame her, and she collapsed. While she lay there, Zentos and Caenas discussed their plan openly. Zentos noted that if they used the same poison, she would remain unconscious for the whole journey. They intended to unleash a monster on her and spread rumors that she recklessly traveled despite the danger, framing her death as the result of her own negligence. It was a scheme that might have succeeded, if not for Kyle's unique second life-altering events. Still, opposing a man like Zentos, a respected and influential figure in the city, would be like digging his own grave. Kyle couldn't fully believe such accusations, but he sensed Melena's sincerity. Melena admits she never imagined Zentos would ally with her brother. She had long known Cain's harbored murderous intentions toward her and had always kept her guard up, but he was a weak man, incapable of acting alone. Zentos' involvement changed everything. Her openness made Ninos uneasy, feeling she was revealing too much. But Melena argued there was no point keeping secrets among allies. She further explained that during her travels, she normally relied on Kilrin and the 5th Battalion, a ceremonial unit made up mostly of women. This time, however, Zentos had volunteered to escort her, while Cain's happened to be in the city. She chose not to suspect them then, but now it was clear. Kyle realized this meant he was now in direct conflict with Zentos, adding another dangerous enemy to his path. He warned Melena that since Zentos' first attempt had failed, he would not stop. Kyle's assessment proved accurate, and Melena reminded him that Zentos was a man of fragile pride. If he learned she was still alive, he would simply choose another method to end her life. That also meant he could twist the situation, accusing Kyle and his squad of harming the princess and murdering her escort. For both Melena and Kyle's group to survive, they needed to remain together until they reached the kingdom again. Melena assured them that if they could keep her safe, she would see they were rewarded. Before she could even ask what they desired, Kyle told her he had no interest in gold or treasures, only in earning honor. The request struck Melena as unusual, yet she promised to grant it regardless. Now they had to decide their next course of action. Two paths lay before them. They could try to make their way back to Aachen, which would be risky since the 2nd Battalion was trailing them, or head towards Sains, a small realm with few inhabitants. But if the 2nd Battalion reached Sains, they would wipe the settlement from the map without hesitation. Returning to Aachen appeared the better choice, especially after Melena revealed that Kilrin would be arriving there with the 5th Battalion within a day. If Kilrin failed to meet her in Aachen, it could spark unwanted problems. This meant heading back would risk an encounter with the 2nd Battalion, but afterward, they could rely on the 5th Battalion for safety. Kyle voiced concern over the 2nd Battalion's strength, but Melena assured him their power matched that of the 5th. With their decision made, the real challenge became avoiding the 2nd Battalion. Kyle told Melena not to trouble herself, he had his own methods. Using his sword, he contacted Sildonia, who scouted ahead and confirmed that Zentos was not among their pursuers. Meanwhile, word of Melena's survival reached Cain's, who became furious with Zentos. Zentos promised he would deal with her, prompting Cain's to order him to join his forces and hunt her down, making sure no mistakes occurred. Zentos warned that Kilrin and the 5th Battalion were close, and if Kilrin did not meet Melena inside the capital, Cain's would be the first she questioned, so he should be ready. Deep in the forest, the group prepared for an imminent clash, stocking magic stones and handing Melena bottles of restorative herbs in case she was wounded. Surprised by their generosity, she asked who they were, and they answered with pride, they were simply aspiring heroes. The 2nd Battalion soon learned that Melena's carriage was nearing, so they set up an ambush. Their plan was to cripple the carriage's wheels, slowing it enough for an attack. But when it approached, Sildonia released magic stones from above, unleashing bursts of flame that scattered their formation. The carriage charged directly through their ranks, with more stones raining down on both sides until they were clear. Inside, everyone breathed easier, drinking herbs to recover and believing the danger had passed. Theron expressed relief that they had made it through. Despite the recklessness of their strategy, it had worked. Their relief was short-lived. The carriage suddenly halted, and they immediately sensed trouble. Upon inspection, they found blades embedded in the wheels, rendering it useless. That meant they needed a new plan to reach Aachen. Nino swiftly led the princess to safety while Kyle asked Urza whether she could use the Windwalker to speed their journey on foot. Urza questioned how they would avoid capture. Kyle instructed Sildonia to determine how many were in pursuit. Sildonia reported roughly 30 soldiers, fewer than before. Kyle remained calm, saying it wouldn't be an issue. All they needed was one person to stay behind and stall their pursuers. Urza's mind raced. Pitting a single fighter against 30 seasoned soldiers was practically suicide, and her instincts told her she was right. Still, Kyle understood they had no other option. It definitely wasn't going to be him taking that risk. As Urza activated the Windwalker, he calmly announced that Theron would be the one to take on the impossible task. Theron instantly objected, No one volunteers for death, but Kyle cut off his closest friend before he could make a real argument. Without hesitation, he triggered the Windwalker and escaped with the others, abandoning Theron to face the soldiers alone. Before the enemy even reached him, Theron lifted a white cloth in surrender. He pleaded with the captain, swearing he had no knowledge of the mission and had been misled by Kyle. As an act of desperation, he even offered all his coin and revealed where a treasure could be found. The captain was unmoved. After inspecting the carriage and failing to find Melena, he ordered his men to execute Kyle's group and then hunt for the princess. Before they could finish Theron off, he clung to the captain's leg, desperately begging to be spared. And then, blood sprayed through the air. But whose? That part wasn't immediately clear. Meanwhile, as Kyle traveled on, Sildonia expressed her unease about abandoning Theron. Kyle then shared something the others had never known: Theron was actually the most powerful among them, and yes, that blood belonged to the captain. Taking out the leader was the smartest move possible. Once the captain was dead, Theron broke free from the restraints around his wrists and went on the offensive. Steel flashed, soldiers fell, and flames erupted as explosions tore through the battlefield. Kyle hadn't been exaggerating. Theron's swordsmanship was unmatched. Urza was stunned. To her, Theron had always been a clown, so she questioned whether all that foolishness had been an act, or if he truly was both ridiculous and dangerous. Turns out, it wasn't entirely an act, he was about 90% genuine fool. Somehow, that realization brought Urza a strange sense of relief. After all, it's quite the shock to learn that the idiot you've known for years could topple trained soldiers with ease. Originally, there had been no intention of slaughtering the soldiers, they weren't the real threat. But Quirina's greed had changed everything, and now their deaths were unavoidable. Theron, however, was enjoying himself. When only 8 remained, he set his weapon aside and feigned surrender once more. They bought it. He explained that his mission wasn't to kill them, but to stall for time. By now, without their horses, catching the princess was impossible. He suggested they retreat while they still could, and after weighing their odds, they decided survival was worth more than a pointless death. They began to depart, but Theron downed a strength elixir. Surging with power, he hurled enchanted stones toward the enemy, leapt into their midst, and severed their heads, revealing he had never planned to let anyone leave alive. With his task finished, he wished Kyle success with the rest of the mission. Elsewhere, Zentos received word that someone was meddling in his objective. He ordered guards to defend Caenas before riding straight into the forest. Sildonia spotted him and quickly warned Kyle, but Zentos saw her and unleashed a bolt of lightning. Fortunately, she survived. Stunned that she had been struck from such a range, she told Kyle, who instantly recognized Zentos as the attacker. Kyle gathered the group and instructed Melena to hide. He would confront Zentos himself, and if the situation turned bad, they were to regroup with Theron. Still, he carried confidence in his victory. Melena, however, was uneasy. Zentos was renowned as the kingdom's mightiest warrior, and she doubted a single man could stand against him. Kyle admitted he'd rather avoid fighting Zentos, but if forced to, he would win. From his tone, Melena realized he knew Zentos personally. She asked whether it was mere coincidence he had rescued her, but quickly withdrew the question, sensing the timing was wrong. She gave him a respectful bow and wished him well before he set out. When they met face to face, Kyle tried opening with words, asking why Zentos came alone. Zentos replied that he didn't wish for more soldiers to die unnecessarily, and once Kyle was gone, he could kill Melena without interruption. Kyle pressed further, asking why he had turned against her, but Zentos brushed it off. Kyle boldly suggested he step aside, but Zentos drew his blade, and they braced for battle. Zentos launched his illusion strike, only to be shocked when Kyle avoided it entirely. Pausing, he admitted Kyle was the first ever to evade that technique. What he didn't realize was that Kyle knew every one of his moves, because Zentos himself had once taught him the art of the sword. Who would emerge victorious? Zentos had the advantage in sheer power, but Kyle, having sparred against him countless times in a past life, could sidestep and deflect every assault. As their blades clashed, it was Zentos' sword that began to crack, leaving him stunned. He stepped back and complimented the craftsmanship of Kyle's weapon. Kyle seized the pause to once again urge Zentos to yield, not wanting to end his life without cause. Zentos, unfamiliar with his opponent, couldn't grasp the strange compassion. Deciding time was short, he prepared a finishing strike he believed would end Kyle for good. Before attacking, he asked for Kyle's name as a final gesture of respect, then swung. Kyle, already anticipating the move, countered perfectly and shattered his sword in two. Still, Zentos refused to surrender, forcing Kyle to make the heartbreaking choice to kill the man he once saw as both mentor and friend. With tears in his eyes, Kyle struck the final blow. Zentos collapsed to his knees, accepting defeat. As life left him, Kyle murmured an apology, saying he had no choice if he was to protect those dear to him, which sadly included Zentos. At dawn, Prince Caenas was left seething and bewildered, unable to comprehend why his plan had unraveled. Kilrin arrived with her knights, followed by Princess Melena, who smiled as she revealed herself to be alive. Before Caenas could fabricate an excuse, Melena ordered Kilrin to detain and interrogate him without mercy. While the knights subdued the prince, Melena stepped outside, where Kyle's companions waited. Once more, Melena thanked Kyle and his allies for saving her. Kyle responded with gratitude of his own for her willingness to trust strangers. Theron, now exuding the calm authority of Levi Tycho, reassured her that with Caenas arrested, her family's internal conflict would be over for good. Melena expresses her gratitude once again and invites them to visit the royal capital so she can properly show her appreciation. Accepting the invitation, Kyle and his companions make their way to the royal castle, where they are welcomed with an exquisite spread of dishes, all personally prepared by Melena. While the ladies try to maintain their manners, Sildonia acts like an overindulged child, piling food onto her plate and devouring everything within reach. Meanwhile, Theron, as usual, focuses his energy on charming women, this time pestering a maid who is clearly uncomfortable. Among them, Kyle remains one of the few behaving respectfully, offering an apology to Melena for his group's lack of decorum. Melena brushes it off, telling him not to concern himself, and resumes her meal. It's then that her father, King Ramonas, enters the hall. Having heard Melena's account, he is relieved to see his daughter unharmed. Everyone rises to greet him, and Kyle begins to kneel out of respect, but the king halts him, explaining that since this is not a formal court session, it isn't necessary. Ramonas emphasizes that he is here not as the ruler of Xerxes, but as Melena's father, to personally thank those who saved her. He addresses the recent events, lamenting that his own son was involved in such disgraceful actions. Even more shocking to him is the fact that Zentos, a knight of honor, would take part in such treachery. Melena shares her belief that both Caenas and Zentos were manipulated, possibly by agents from nearby nations or even distant demonic forces. Because of this, she insists the matter must be investigated thoroughly, assigning Kilrin's squad to the task. The king asks Kyle and his party to keep the matter secret, warning that public knowledge could endanger the realm. Kyle agrees, vowing never to act against the interests of Xerxes. Though Ramonas remains wary, Melena speaks on their behalf, assuring him they can be trusted. Choosing to accept her judgment, the king promises to reward them for their bravery. With that, he departs, and the banquet carries on until Kyle's group eventually sets off again. Soon after, rumors spread about the deaths of the royal knights. To control the narrative, the kingdom issues an announcement claiming both the prince and princess were attacked by a massive monster horde, during which Zentos and half his forces perished. To explain Prince Caenas' absence from public view, the notice adds that he was severely injured and sent to the distant city of Kortin to recover. It also credits Kyle and his team for their heroic actions, which leads to them being summoned before the king once more, this time in front of the citizens, for an official reward ceremony. Before the gathered crowd, the king commends them for repelling the monsters and awards them the St. Randonair Medal for their accomplishment. As the leader, Kyle accepts the medal, receiving a wave of applause from the people, who begin to see him as their champion. This reaction is exactly what Kyle had been aiming for, and he smiles inwardly, hoping his path will continue toward becoming a celebrated hero of the nation. That night, long after the palace has gone quiet, King Ramonas sits alone, drinking away his unease. In his solitude, he admits to himself that he orchestrated the attack on Melena. His motive isn't rooted in disdain for women, but in fear. Fear that if Melena were crowned queen, her talent and benevolence would usher in such prosperity that his reign would be forgotten entirely. Unwilling to be overshadowed, especially by his own daughter, and with her coronation only days away, Ramonas feels the pressure mounting to find a way to stop it. At that moment, a figure draped in a dark cloak emerges in front of him, revealing that he had been silently listening from the shadows all along. Ramonas is stunned into silence, but before he can react, the figure clamps a hand over his mouth and murmurs that in a previous life, during the Great Invasion, he had advised him to lend aid to the dwarfs of a neighboring realm. The king, however, let his pride dictate his choice and turned them away, leading to the dwarfs' complete annihilation. That decision triggered a chain of events that would later contribute to Zerga's collapse. With those words, it becomes clear that the cloaked figure is none other than Kyle. He goes on to say that while he had harbored resentment toward the king for his arrogance, he had no intention of acting on it. However, the day before, just as Zentos drew his final breath, he apologized to King Ramonas, and in that moment, Kyle realized the king was the true puppet master orchestrating events from the shadows. This revelation left Kyle with an easy choice: to remove Ramonas permanently, convinced that Melena would lead the kingdom far better. When the king attempts to flee and rips off Kyle's mask, Kyle responds by hurling him over the balcony to his death. The loud splash below draws the attention of nearby guards, but the deed is already done. They find no evidence of a struggle or forced entry. Investigators conclude the king must have accidentally fallen from the balcony while intoxicated, but to avoid a scandal, the official account given to the public is that he succumbed to a sudden heart attack. Kyle's companions, oblivious to his quiet act of regicide, find the timing suspicious, the king's death coming so soon after their reward, but they let the matter drop. Later, Kyle visits Melena to check on her well-being and learns she is unexpectedly engaged. She herself was unaware until recently that her betrothed is Mesa, the third prince of the Gargan Empire. Relations between Zergus and Gargan have been tense, ever since a dispute over the Karen territory. As part of a peace arrangement, Karen was ceded to Zergus, with Melena's marriage to Prince Mesa serving as the binding alliance. Yet Melena wishes to refuse the union. She reasons that since no formal agreement was documented, Karen should remain under Zergus' control even if she rejects the engagement. She then asks Kyle to deliver the message to Karen's governor and secure his consent for breaking off the betrothal. That night, in his inn room, Kyle worries about Gargan's potential reaction to the refusal. Speaking with Sildonia, he hears her observation that Karen may be facing deeper troubles, especially since its governor didn't attend the king's funeral. Sildonia suspects Melena is sending Kyle not only as her envoy but also to investigate and possibly resolve issues in Karen. Kyle sees this as a chance to build influence and connections, though he also aims to keep some personal distance from Melena without stating the reason. By the next morning, he meets Melena once more. She hands him a sealed scroll for delivery to Karen, expressing her grief over her father's sudden death, before quickly steering the discussion to other matters. With a bright tone, Melena asked Kyle if he'd consider joining the Royal Guard, wanting him close as her personal knight. Kyle, flustered, declined her invitation and began stumbling over his words, which only made Melena's smile widen. She wished him the best on his travels and bid him goodbye. As Kyle departed from the castle, Melena watched from her balcony, silently hoping for his success. Her aide, Ninos, soon appeared, questioning whether she had managed to turn Kyle into her obedient pawn yet. Melena chuckled and replied that she hadn't entertained such thoughts yet, but if the day came when she needed him close, she'd ensure he was firmly under her influence. Later, Kyle and his companion stopped by an armory to stock up on new equipment. Kyle inquired with the shopkeeper about the region of Cairn. The man explained that Cairn was a mining settlement operated by the Blacksmiths Guild, its guildmaster holding near-total control and recently stirring trouble. He also noted that Cairn was renowned for its shops selling top-tier equipment, sparking Theron's excitement as he sought a blade to match his swordsmanship. Leaving the shop, the group set out on foot, laughing and chatting along the way. Soon, they reached the outskirts of Cairn, and were taken aback to find the city nestled within the mountains. Sildonia, ever the walking encyclopedia, corrected them. The city wasn't built into the mountain, rather, the mountain had been shaped around it. She explained that during Giles' reign, Cairn served as a stronghold against demon attacks. In that time, rich ore deposits were found, and ancient mags and saints used powerful magic to raise the land, bringing the ore to the surface and forming the mountain itself. In short, Cairn was essentially a colossal or vein the size of a world tree. Without warning, a squadron of wyvern riders appeared overhead, and from their attire, Kyle recognized them as the Gargan Empire's wyvern knights. Suspecting they were there due to Melena breaking off her engagement, Kyle moved quickly to prevent any incident. Once inside the city, he spoke to a stationed knight and asked for an audience with Zergus as ambassador. While the knight confirmed Kyle's credentials and purpose, Urza confided to Lisa her unease around the many dwarfs present, citing the long-standing tension between dwarfs and elves. She insisted the animosity was entirely on the dwarf side, unwilling to admit her people bore any blame. Soon after, the ambassador, Miss Miranda, arrived to welcome them. Lisa gave Kyle a little push toward Miranda, nearly sending him stumbling into her. He caught himself by grabbing her hand. Lisa felt a spark of jealousy, though she'd initiated the contact. Kyle then presented the sealed message from Melena, which Miranda read, realizing he was there as the Queen's envoy. Miranda warmly remarked that the Queen had chosen an exceptionally capable representative. Her words hinted at familiarity, and she revealed that she had once been one of Melena's diplomacy instructors. Before discussing business, Miranda bowed her head in thanks for Kyle's role in saving Melena's life. Then she delivered troubling news: Governor Bax was gravely ill and unfit for visitors. Still, by protocol, he was obliged to meet with the Queen's messengers. Escorting the group toward Bax's location, Miranda's heavy security caught Lisa's eye. Kyle reasoned it was likely due to her fear of sudden moves from the Gargan Empire. Theron, unwilling to stand idle while Kyle spoke, opted to explore the city instead, with Kyle warning him to be back before nightfall. Eventually, they arrived at the Gargan embassy, where an elderly man spotted them, none other than the Gargan ambassador, whose presence alone soured Miranda's mood. His companion, Alzad, the Empire's second highest court sorcerer, explained they too sought an audience with Cairn's governor. Miranda questions Alzad about having official clearance from the Queen, pointing out that the territory falls under the Zergus kingdom. Alzad counters by reminding her that Cairn is an autonomous city-state and therefore owes no obligation to seek her or the Queen's consent. Their polite expressions barely mask the clear hostility between them. Choosing to avoid an argument, Miranda suggests they visit the governor together. Before proceeding inside, Alzad turns to Kyle with a courteous inquiry about his identity. Kyle responds that he represents the new queen. Hearing this, Alzad brightens, recognizing Kyle as the hero who saved Melena. He remarks that he knew Kyle's parents, especially his mother, Saria, adding that Kyle resembles her more than Leonard. Kyle is caught off guard by the comment, and Alzad explains that he and Saria were classmates in magic studies 2 decades earlier. He fondly recalls their time together and expresses pleasure at meeting her son. They shake hands in goodwill, while Alzad silently wonders if this young man will bring some excitement to their meeting ahead. When they reach the governor's residence, the butler blocks their entry, stating the governor is unwell and unable to see anyone. Accepting the refusal, Alzad and his knights depart, leaving Miranda uneasy and suspecting Gargan's involvement. She notes the governor's illness has dragged on for 2 months, and with the situation worsening, she decides to nominate Gazas, Cairn's top blacksmith, as the new governor. Elsewhere, Theron wanders aimlessly through a city overflowing with blacksmith workshops, unimpressed by any of the weapons on display. His irritation grows as he notices a complete absence of women. Fortune finally seems to smile on him when he hears a cry for help, a delicate-looking figure being harassed. Without hesitation, Theron punches the offender. Playing the gallant rescuer, he asks if she's alright, only for the person to reveal they're actually male. Bro immediately questions if this makes him gay, deciding he'll only help women. He turns to leave, but when the effeminate youth mentions having an older sister identical in appearance, Theron springs back into action and takes out all the thugs instantly. The youth, named Go, thanks him and introduces himself as an artificer. He explains that a client who had funded a magical weapon project demanded his money back after learning it would take 10 more years to complete, leading the man to send thugs after Go. Theron understands but is only interested in meeting the sister. Go, however, admits she's already married, leaving Theron stunned at having been tricked. Meanwhile, keeping her earlier promise, Miranda approaches Gazas to persuade him into becoming governor. She isn't surprised when he refuses outright. She tries appealing to him by explaining the Zergus Empire's desire to build strong ties with the Choran Empire, stressing the need for a capable leader. Gazas remains adamant, insisting he's merely a blacksmith and intends to stay that way. Listening outside, the rest of the team conclude the discussion is going nowhere, confirming Urza's opinion that appointing a dwarf as governor was a poor plan. At that moment, Go walks in with an unexpected companion, Theron. The team learns Go is actually Gazas's child. After exchanging updates, Go, surprised to see Miranda, invites the group to her workshop. She shows them a potion she has been brewing. Theron, puzzled by her human appearance despite having a dwarf father, hears that she and her sister are from their mother's first marriage, their mother now deceased. He remarks that their home lost its spirit after his sister Wednesday. Serving drinks, Go takes a cup to Kyle, who is absorbed in reading the household's books. Before the drink arrives, Kyle opens one volume and spots an illustration of a golem that jolts his memory of a past life. He immediately questions Go about whether she created it, leaving her visibly stunned. For now, it was nothing more than an ongoing project, the same one that had kept him drowning in debt. Yet, Kyle understood what they truly were: golems. That craft had vanished after the fall of the kingdom, though later the Gargan Empire managed to field a similar type of golem to the one Go was now building. These constructs were far stronger than humans and played a decisive role in past battles. Kyle brought Go to Sildonia, who instantly recognized the method Go used in its construction. She remarked that the technique was from ancient times, to which Go confirmed her suspicion. Examining it closely, Sildonia suggested swapping its magical components for ordinary ones, assuring Kyle it would still function. Trusting her judgment, Kyle instructed Go to complete the weapon quickly. But when Go revealed that his vision would require at least a decade to finish, Kyle demanded it be done in under a year. Go explained this was impossible without massive funding. Finances were no obstacle for Kyle. He poured out handfuls of gold coins and told Go to use whatever was needed to meet the goal. He also insisted that no one else learn about their dealings. Go hesitated, uneasy about hiding it from his other sponsors, but Kyle calmly told him to claim failure to them and return their funds. Kyle would handle the cost himself. Realizing he had landed a wealthy backer, Go was pleased, though unaware of the consequences. Once their discussion ended, they met Miranda, who reported that Gazas had refused the offered position. Frustrated, Miranda departed, but Kyle intended to speak with Gazas personally. Before Kyle could begin, Gazas made it clear he wanted no discussion. Go persuaded him to listen briefly. Theron presented his sword, stating it lacked the strength he desired. Although it was among the finest blades available to him, Theron wanted something like Kyle's own. When Kyle revealed his sword, Gazas recognized it instantly. It was Zal's blade, a legendary weapon he never expected to encounter again. He admitted he could not replicate it and, being in no mood to talk, dismissed them. Outside, they considered his words. He had seen such a sword before, which was startling. Sildonia was disheartened to learn she was not unique. They decided to revisit Gazas the next day for answers. That evening, Kyle reflected on what lay ahead with Sildonia. In his previous life, Go's work had failed, leading him to sell the rights to the Empire, who improved it into the model later used in battle. Right now, informing the Empire about this weapon would only make them stronger, which they wished to avoid, especially with tensions rising since the Queen's broken engagement. At this rate, humans might turn on each other before the Great War even began. Later that night, Kyle received an unexpected visit from Alzad, who invited him to lunch the following day, encouraging him to bring other ambassadors. He even proposed they ride a wyvern together, which surprised Kyle. Were outsiders even allowed? Alzad explained it was his mother, Saria, who had developed the technology for controlling wyverns. Kyle was stunned. Speaking warmly of his mother, Alzad shared how he once aspired to be like her, though she had long since settled into the life of a housewife. His real aim was simply to reconnect with an old friend's son, and Kyle agreed. After Alzad departed, Sildonia emerged, remarking that she sensed strong magical power from him during their meeting. The next day, the others declined the lunch, so Kyle went with Miranda. Upon passing through a certain doorway, Kyle felt an odd, unsettling sensation. He stepped back, reopened the door, and was met with a horrifying sight: blood everywhere, and Alzad lying lifeless. The murderer, a long-eared figure, stood amid the carnage. As she turned, a horn came into view. Kyle's voice rang out in alarm. She was a demon.